Okay, let's talk about color theory. So color theory is defined as a mix of science, psychology, and emotion. We'll talk about science first. We'll talk about emotion in a following video. So a little bit of review about how colors go together. So when we talk about the CMYK color space, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Now the K stands for key, actually. It doesn't stand for the K at the end of the word of black. So it is yellow, cyan, magenta, yellow, and key being the black color. It is a subtractive color model because it subtracts from the color of white. So we'll have the cyan color, then we print the magenta color, and then we print the yellow color. And then you'll see in the process of doing that, we've created our red, green, and blue from the RGB color space. And when all of the colors are combined, we've got black, the exact opposite of the white paper. And then we talked about how that works when we print an actual color. So here is the original image. We talked about this before. And then when you print the yellow screen, print the magenta on top of it, print a cyan on top of it, and then finally print a black. 4-color printing, CMYK. All right, now we switch to the RGB color space, which is an additive. We add to black. The more we add, the brighter it gets. So there's our red, green, blue, where the overlap gives us our cyan, magenta, and yellow, with white in the middle where all 3 colors are on at full power. So now RGB is defined as the 3 values, and they go from 1 to 200, from 0 to 255. And then CMYK are values from 0 to 100. So what we can do is we choose an RGB value, and then we want to convert it so that to the hexadecimal value so that we can use it in web design. Okay, because we can't define a color in CMYK or RGB for the web. We need to define it as a hex. Okay, so if we do select the eyedropper tool, choose this color, then we'll see that here's our RGB values for it. Here would be the CMYK values for it. And then there is the hexadecimal value. Okay. The hexadecimal value, there's going to be 2 characters, letter or number, for each color value. So the red is EE, the green 20, and the blue FF. So let's type in another one. Let's do 3B 599B. So that gives us this kind of this powdery gray blue color. Okay. And then we have our RGB values, and we have our CMYK values. Now, when we have to do the opposite of this in Canva, if you have to use Canva, I mean, if you can use an Adobe product, fine. You can get what you've got here. Everything's all laid out for you in one shot. In Canva, you can only select colors via its hex value. So how can I choose a color in Canva and know what its RGB values would be or what its CMYK values would be? So we will go over that shortly. There's one more color space that I wanted to cover again is the Pantone colors. Okay, there's our Cheerios box. I've talked about that before. And the Cheerios Pantone color is 108C, the C standing for coated. This is whether you would print on a coated stock or on an uncoated stock. So now we can talk about colors themselves, and then we'll go back and talk about how to select colors in Canva to use in other print applications. First, let's talk about what saturation is. Okay. You're going to talk about hue, saturation, and value, okay, as ways to talk about color in a more scientific form. So saturation is take a solid color with no white or black or gray in it. That's its most saturated value. Okay? And then as you add colors of white or black or gray, the color will lose its saturation. And if you add enough white and black and gray, you can actually get that color all the way down to gray, which would be what we would call desaturated. Okay. So that is saturation from the original hue at 100% of its color, all the way down to no color, and then you're just at that saturated gray. Okay. Now a hue is what we would normally refer to as a color. Okay. It's a specific electromagnetic wavelength. Okay. So we're all familiar with red, yellow, and blue, and we've got orange, green, and purple, and then a couple of the colors in between. Like if you were younger growing up and you had the 64 box of crowns, and you had the yellow orange and the yellow green and teal and magenta and all those other colors. But that is a hue. So whenever we say color, we're actually referring to its hue. And now we've got the value. Okay, so we've done saturation and we've done hue, and now we've got the value, and that is its lightness or darkness. We call those tints and shades. Okay. Tint closer to white and shade closer to black. Someone says, I'd like that particular shade of color, and they're talking about a pastel, then they're not quite using the right terminology, but don't correct them. You'll just sound like a geek. So we know that the technical terminology, if something is a tint, it goes closer to white. Something of a shade goes closer to black. All right, so now we're going to talk about the color wheel itself. Okay, so this color wheel I put together with that center ring being a little bit wider, because that is the the completely saturated hue. All right, so the two outer rings are shades of that hue, and then the two inner rings are tints of that hue. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the different color themes or color spaces that are out there and what they mean, right? What they represent. All right, so we got primary. We're all familiar with that. Okay. The primary, red, yellow, blue, that we're all familiar with since our childhood, but that's part of the problem with them, is that they represent our childhood. Okay, if you make a product red, yellow, and blue, you better be selling it to children, because that's what that color scheme pretty much means nowadays. All right, but if we want to create a logo or create a color scheme, we can use two of them. Okay, there are many successful logos that are blue and yellow, or blue and red, or red and yellow. See examples of each there. I think we're all pretty familiar with them. IKEA, Best Buy, both do the blue and yellow very well. With Bank of America, Domino's Pizza, American Airlines, they all do the red and blue very well. And then In-N-Out Burger, McDonald's, there's numerous ones. Shell Oil use the red and yellow combination quite well. The next would be the secondary colors. Okay, so these are the colors that we'll talk about later on that add an air of sophistication to whatever they're used for, simply because they are not the primary colors anymore. So there are not many available color combinations of these guys. Purple and orange, not so much. Orange and green, not so much. Purple and green, not so much. There are, just shades off of them, but not quite these particular colors. So you won't get the purple and orange, but you'll get something close to it with the FedEx logo. And you won't get orange and green, except you'll get something close to it with the John Deere logo. So you get close to them, but not quite with direct secondary colors. And then there's tertiary, and those are all the colors that are in the middle. Now, so talk about a monochromatic color scheme, and that's exactly it. A monochromatic color scheme is one hue and its tints and shades, and that's it. So this is useful for some things, but not other things, because obviously there's not a whole lot of room to work with here. You've got one color to one hue to work with, and that's it. So you won't find these used very, very often by themselves. Okay. Next one is analogous, and that's three colors that are side by side, all touching, all share one particular color across. In this particular case, it's cyan. Okay, so the color on the left is cyan with some yellow in it. The color on the right is cyan with some red in it. So you can see that those could be used together for a very calming and subdued design. Okay. Next would be complementary. Okay. Complementary colors right across from one another. Purple, yellow, red, green, blue, and orange. Okay. So we talked a little bit about some of these, right? Can anyone think of a purple and yellow logo combination, a blue and orange color combination, and a red and green color combination? And oddly, the red and green one, which immediately to me says either Christmas or any Italian pizza restaurant in any strip mall in the United States, their logo is red and green. But there's actually a phrase out there, red and green should not be seen. But I actually think Mountain Dew does a pretty decent job with it, as does Quiznos subs. FedEx, again, we've got our complementary with our blue and orange, and then the Los Angeles Lakers and LSU both pull off purple and yellow quite well. But in general, these color combinations are relatively rare in corporate logos. Okay. And next we'll talk about split complementary. So that's a color, and then the color to two colors to either side of its complement is called a split complementary. Right? And some people will use this color combination for certain things. That will give you a lot of choices if you're designing something, because now you've got usually darker colors and lighter colors and brighter colors and cooler colors and warmer colors. So we'll give you a little bit more to work with.